You light our homes. Keep us warm.
You help us explore, innovate, and achieve the unthinkable.
You are everywhere.
Yet, sometimes out of reach.
You move us forward and bring us together.
And together, we're on a journey towards the future of energy.
So what will it look like?
It's hard to say, but we know it will be sustainable and abundant.
We're already on our way.
With a common purpose, each of us playing our part.
At Deloitte, we're connecting every bright mind, every organization, every startup, every innovator.
Every citizen, CEO, and regulator.
Making this future happen won't be easy, so we're developing practical solutions.
And a clear roadmap to help our clients on their way.
We'll keep making those connections.
Each step well planned, moving forward together.
To make our new energy future a reality. Let's connect for a new energy future.
Thank you very much.
As well. And our first speaker is Delphine Gozzilion. Proszę Państwa, już Jorgo Hazirmatlis wspomniał, że jednym z ważnych kierunków
Jorgo Hazirmatlis has mentioned that one of the important directions will be the use of hydrogen in seaborne transport and in the ports. So let us listen to the latest news about the changes and regulatory changes that are occurring and what opportunities offer themselves, what results from Fit for 55 for low emission shipping.
Witam Państwa. Jestem z organizacji.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I represent an NGO, Transport and Environment, that operates in Brussels for the environment.
Because it's easier for me, but I welcome you afterwards for discussions. So Transport and Environment is an organization which main office is in Brussels, but we also have an office in Poland. And we're focusing on the decarbonization of transports. And here I'm here to talk about maritime decarbonization. So we're doing a lot of studies also, and we are also doing some advocacy to policymakers in the context of the EU Fit for 55. And this is also in a partnership very often with Hydrogen Europe. So, today I'd like to speak about the green hydrogen technologies that we have to decarbonize shipping. So our view here is that we have the technologies, there are sustainable and scalable fuels to decarbonize that sector, and all of this is based on hydrogen. Of course, we can have battery electric technologies, but this is very much suitable for small vessels. For anything that is bigger than a small ferry, we will need hydrogen, either in direct form or with derivatives of green hydrogen, so green ammonia, for example, or green methanol. We identified green ammonia as the most promising fuel for long-duty shipping transport, because it is the most cost competitive among other e-fuels. So, why is it an opportunity for ports to deliver green hydrogen for shipping? Well, a few months ago, we were having some difficulties with policymakers in Brussels, and especially the European Parliament, to try to convince them, well, you know, there is this green hydrogen economy, but ships could also benefit from it, and it's actually a sector that is very hard to decarbonize. But they were telling us it's extremely expensive. It would be very expensive for the end consumer. Well, we did the calculation, and actually, if you put a pair of sneakers in a box, in a container ship, it would cost just 8 cents more to power the ship with 100% of green hydrogen. Here it is e-methanol. So this is because of the magics of shipping economics, and which are quite unknown to most of us. But the facts are here. And the point is how to upscale this green hydrogen for shipping, because currently there is no green hydrogen flowing to ports or powering ships. And the answer, we believe, is in legislation. So, of course, we have some projects in ports. Many large ports in Europe have developed green hydrogen hub strategies, but we don't see a lot in these strategies of deploying this hydrogen for ships. It's mostly about powering the machinery in the port, or to transport it for land-based activities. However, there is one port which already has hydrogen infrastructure for ships available and running. It's Antwerp in Belgium. They have a hydrogen multimodal station that is available for trucks and ships. So that's quite an interesting synergy. and also a mobile refueling station, which is basically going through the port of Antwerp and is available to refuel ships. So that is quite positive development, and we're beginning to see the same with green ammonia. So there are many projects developing around the world. Here I'd like to quote the example of Norway, which is already developing hydrogen, an ammonia bunkering network, and it has to be up and running by 2024, which is just 2 years from now. So this is coming. And now what's the role of the EU legislation in all this? Well, just 1 year ago, the European Commission has published a set of proposals which were called the Fit for 55, so to reach our climate objectives by 2030. There were many proposals about shipping. One of them was the FuelEU Maritime. We analyzed this proposal already 1 year ago. Our conclusion, unfortunately, was that the GHG targets that were set on ships to reduce the carbon intensity of the fuels that they use are so low that they couldn't drive enough uptake of green hydrogen fuels. Actually, they wouldn't drive any e-fuel at all. And this is quite disappointing coming from Europe. And this is why we have been very much focusing on the European Parliament and member states to try to step up a bit the ambition. This is not just a story about targets. This is also a matter of creating new instruments. And here, what we have been proposing to policymakers this year, and this is together with Hydrogen Europe, which already mentioned the idea actually in the opening speech, is about having a sub-quota, a dedicated target for green hydrogen fuels. This means that 6% of ships functioning in Europe would have to run on green ammonia, green methanol, or green hydrogen. And this would create the opportunities that we need to create market demand, because today, because of the really different costs between alternative fuels in shipping, there is no business case. Green ammonia is 4 times more expensive for ships to use than biofuels, for example, or fossil liquefied natural gas. So it's really a matter of creating these policy mechanisms to enable hydrogen to kickstart. So that was the proposal of the subquota. And then just to conclude, I would like to say that so to create a hydrogen economy that is working for ships, we need to look at all segments of the value chain. And this means putting in place targets on all segments. So we have proposed a target for the supply side, for fuel suppliers, and this has just been proposed by the European Parliament, so it's a success. The Parliament has mandated fuel suppliers to deliver minimum amounts of renewable hydrogen fuels to shipping by 2030. So this is very good news for the sector. And we hope that member states will also enforce this goal. And then secondly, we need demand to be mandated, because without demand, of course, all of these volumes of hydrogen would be lost. And finally, of course, ports are key here because they're the ones to provide the infrastructure for ships to navigate. And this is why we are calling on the European Parliament to also adopt refueling infrastructure targets for hydrogen and ammonia. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. Dziękuję bardzo. Dla mnie była bardzo...
Thank you very much. What I found very interesting was this piece of information that introducing green hydrogen causes such a minor increase in the costs of transportation. That should be a sufficient stimulus for the introduction of hydrogen. So my question is therefore to Delphine.
vessels about the fuel EU maritime problem. How do you think it will end? Really, the new targets will be approved?
Is it working? Yeah, okay. Thank you for that question. Well, we've been working on this for over a year now, so it's starting to be a bit long. But we hope to come to an end of negotiations, well, at least with the Parliament, in just 2 weeks from now. The Parliament is about to adopt its position on the Fuel EU Maritime, which I talked about earlier, and this is about setting targets on ships, so for green hydrogen, but also for other fuels. And of course the AFIR, which is the regulation putting in place infrastructure targets for ports. Here we have seen a lot of willingness from the European Parliament to implement a sub-target for green hydrogen fuels and ships. And we hope that this is confirmed in just 2 weeks. And then, of course, we will have to enter into negotiations also with the Council and Member States. And so far, Poland hasn't taken a decision yet on whether it would support such a target for ships. And so to harness the opportunities also that we have to create a new hydrogen economy. Because of course, when we encourage demand for hydrogen for passenger cars or to decarbonize heating, the costs are borne by the consumer directly. There are no economies of scale such as for shipping. So also in terms of, well, cost of living and also the energy security, I believe that encouraging green hydrogen demand for shipping is the right solution.
Okay, thank you. So if you can share with us the position paper about that, so we can maybe ask our representative in Parliament to support this idea. Thank you for presentation. Teraz chciałbym prosić przedstawiciela.
Now I would like to ask the representative of our port of Gdynia to tell us about the fuel and power transformation in the port of Gdynia. Are we really catching up with the new initiatives? How well are we ready to handle these challenges? Beata, Szymanowska. I will approach the lectern too. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for making it possible for me to tell you a bit about our transformation. I wasn't me. If at the beginning I didn't tell you that we were in Gdynia now, Gdynia that developed owing to the port. That was established here and that kept developing ever since. The port of Gdynia is an entity that organizes the operations of many other entities. We can handle any kind of cargo. The only challenge that we have is insufficient area. Still, year to year, we notice increases in our handling capacity. In September 1920, the Polish Sejm adopted an act on the construction of the port of Gdynia. We celebrated the anniversary. The event stretched over a week. It is important for us to have this 100th anniversary, so it is a pleasure for me to be able to tell you about those celebrations now. Anyhow, back to the port of Gdynia, we have a number of entities operating within it, handling different kinds of cargoes. We've got operational terminals. We have around 10 of those. These are the most important ones, but one should also mention that in the port of Gdynia, we have many entities that also offer different kinds of economic activity. We've got shipyards, we've got those entities that provide port-related services, also those pertaining to maritime economy. these smaller entities also support the bigger ones so that they can really meet the demand for handling of different kinds of cargoes. Given that the port is a big entity bringing together many smaller ones, a few years ago we started working on fuel and power transformation. What I listed here are the most important initiatives concerning infrastructure, superstructure, two major directions, that is, alternative fuels and renewable energy. Port of Gdynia authorities is a topic that animates a range of activities catering for different needs of our customers. We bring together those clients from port areas with those that are bidders in all sorts of procedures concerning our fuel and power transformation. Think of producers of equipment or machines that can offer their products to the recipients operating within our port terminals. I will turn to the screen as I cannot see the small print anymore. Anyhow, we have both filling up stations. We've got pipelines that are to be built in the port for the entire transformation to be attainable in terms of superstructure. We've got tanks, containers, we've got a bunker and vehicles enabling filling up. In terms of energy, what we want to introduce in terms of infrastructure, we've got cable lines, distribution lines, switchboard supply stations, fuel stations, generation infrastructure, transformer stations. When I say superstructure, I mean energy storages, generators, transformation station, mobile ones, and also mobile generators supplying the vessels from the land. So all this is to be introduced into the port and developed. We need to cooperate with multiple entities to be able to develop the port. These are the major players, both from Poland and abroad. The fuel and energy transformation has a few components to it. One of those is the implementation of hydrogen-related economy. A discussion has been going on how to ensure the fuels for those vehicles operating within the port and those ships calling at the port, and we are considering hydrogen. Before that, we focused on LNG and we introduced all the procedures related to it in the port of Gdynia. Now we believe that we shouldn't focus on a single kind of fuel in the port. In any global port, well, you have to think about offering different kinds of fuels, hydrogen among them, and also hydrogen derivatives. Owing to our consultants having carried out all sorts of analysis, we can say that we are launching the initiative of creating a hydrogen hub in the port. So what do we imagine this hub to be like? How is hydrogen to be handled in port terminals? This is just an example. We hope that we will have mobile station transporting hydrogen for those pieces of equipment and machinery that needs it across the terminal. We can talk about some stationary stations where you'll be able to take hydrogen or its derivatives according to your needs. There are a number of questions now on how to organize various processes in the port. There are no similar solutions in any other Polish port, so we need to develop it all. And our idea is to cooperate In the area of alternative fuels, we do not have competitors here. The more we cooperate, collaborate, and resolve issues that we face, the more joint projects we have, the cheaper hydrogen is going to be. This is our idea for the development of hydrogen economy. And that is why we decided to go for the development of the hydrogen hub in the port of Gdynia. There are two areas in the port of Gdynia where you can also see the administrative borders of the port. They're adjacent to each other. They are closest to the embankments in the port, and a more distant one, the logistics zone, that lies within three municipalities, Kosakowo, Orumia, and Gdynia. As I said, the handling terminals, as the stakeholders of hydrogen economy, are very much interested in the introduction of hydrogen-related solutions. We've been working together for some 4 years now to make it happen. We have initiated both the Hydrogen Valley and an active participant in the hydrogen technology cluster. At the Ministry of Climate, we have signed the hydrogen agreement. I'm also the board's plenipotentiary for hydrogen-related topics and an active member of a coordination board for the implementation of hydrogen at the Ministry of Climate. So I wanted to emphasize that we have been participating really actively in the activities concerning the implementation of hydrogen-related technologies, and there are partners that wish to go hand in hand with us, enabling the introduction of hydrogen and its derivatives to the port. This is the idea that we used to display. I mean, we have already shown it. We want to jump at all the opportunities that hydrogen economy offers. As mentioned a moment ago, LNG is the basis that we learn from. Just a short story now. It will concern LNG. Well, a few years ago, without having any regulations on how to bunker vessels, we had to come up with a way of doing it so that state administration would make it possible, would allow for that. We invited the representatives of the government to participate in exercises. There were some experts present, and we have bunkered ships already 17 times ever since, even though there is no regulation on the possibility of LNG bunkering in the ports. It's still not around. It has not been issued.
They're also developing photovoltaic farms, which allow us to obtain energy. So far, we don't have a project yet which would allow for creation of a photo electrolyzer at this photovoltaic farm. Of course, we'll have a problem with lack of energy now and very expensive energy, so it's not quite possible now to, from business point of view. However, in the future, I think we'll have more interesting projects which will allow us to produce cheap renewable energy and then transform it into hydrogen fuel, which will be used in the port of Gdynia. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask you about what concrete difficulties do you encounter when it comes to implementation of hydrogen hub? I think we have similar problems as most ports. So the main problem is lack of hydrogen fuel and its derivatives. We do hope, because there is a project that's being done by the city of Gdynia. In a year, we'll have a first hydrogen distributor in Kaczybuki, and from there, I think, hopefully, through mobile transport, we could bring this fuel to the port of Gdynia. The second problem is lack of equipment which would make use of this fuel. Why is it a problem? Well, in fact, companies which produce equipment, machines, etc., they want to go into small pilot projects, and it's an issue because nobody wants to go into many kinds of different types of transportation or pieces of equipment used in terminals if it doesn't make business sense. So for us, the basic direction is implementation of a few pilot projects which would demonstrate that it's safe, that it's usable, that it can be utilized, for example, with ridge stackers or tractors that we have, and so on, tractor trailers or other pieces of machinery we have. Thank you very much. I think it's very good that one of our speakers will be Josep son Argent from Valenciaport, and perhaps you'll be able to learn and capitalize on that example. I'd like to move on to our next panelist, Mr. Rasmussen, who will tell us about the concept of green corridors connecting ports.
The ideas of green corridors between ports, between hydrogen-supplied ports. Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And as mentioned, I'm from the Mærsk Mc-Kinney Møller for Zero Carbon Shipping, a non-profit independent research and development center. And what we do is really try to accelerate the transition towards net zero fuels for the maritime industry. Together with partners, we try to drive and facilitate the development and implementation of new technologies, build confidence in new concepts, and mature viable strategic ways to drive the required systematic and regulatory change. So very much elements also presented by Delphine from the panel, and one activity that we have worked with has been the green corridor concepts, also working with the Port of Gdynia, actually. So my talk is on using green corridors or green shipping corridors to build coherent value chains to decarbonize shipping. And then I'll also touch upon the role and possibilities of the seaport in this context. It all started with the 5 ports getting together, drafting a vision and objective, which I will touch on, really to mobilize first movers to drive the early adoption of these hydrogen-derived fuels. I'll also just briefly explain what a green corridor is, and then what we've done as part of this pre-feasibility assessment before actually moving on to the role of and possibilities of the ports. The green corridor network in Northern Europe and the Baltic Sea was a project we facilitated in cooperation with Port of Gdynia, Port of Rotterdam, Port of Hamburg, Port of Tallinn, and Port of Rønne in Denmark. And it was really to look at what are the opportunities to start the first decarbonized maritime shipping within the Baltic Sea. So we're really talking from the northern part of Denmark, and if you cross over to Sweden, and all the way up to the Botnic Bay, so all of the Baltic region. We looked at all the inbound, outbound maritime traffic, which vessel types were operating. And then we have also mapped what fuels options was available, spoken to a number of stakeholders across the value chain, and then in the end also again looked what role can the port take in this. Let me say we've not just looked at these 5 ports, we've looked at the entire region, but these 5 ports were the ports that got together and said they would really like to run this study. The green corridor or green shipping corridor is a cross value chain collaboration. And as mentioned earlier, it really starts with the supplier side, or you could say the fuel producers, fuel production, or those that are developing projects for production of renewables or biofuels. It is the off-taker side or the demand side, which in this case is shipping, and then the intermediate logistics and bunkering, so where the port plays a role, but also the companies responsible for transporting fuel from producers to the ports and the local bunkering companies providing the fuel to the ship. Cargo owners can play a role because, as mentioned earlier, the additional cost may go on to the cargo, and we want end users like me and like you in the room to pay that additional cost for a pair of sneakers or for a TV. But we also need to look at the financing side. So how can we realize the capital for the investment required across the value chain? We need the regulatory side, as already discussed, and then also other stakeholders. But it's really working across the entire value chain. That is how we can realize green shipping corridors. We also need to look at where's the decarbonization potential, because there is decarbonization potential by electrifying trucks in the port or having trucks running on hydrogen. If we look at the cargo and fuel transport, we can see that the main emission is really from the fuel usage on the ship. There's also emissions associated to the fuel production. There's emissions associated to land transport, but roughly 70% of the emissions associated with transporting goods using maritime transport is actually from the maritime transport itself, or the consumption of the fuel on the vessel. So that is why we are also so focused on making alternative fuels available. The pre-feasibility assessment we made, as mentioned, we looked at the activity in the region, we looked at the vessel types, fuel options, spoke to stakeholders, we made some recommendations in the end, but also looked, as mentioned, on the roles and possibilities of the ports. For the particular region we looked at, and now you can see in the most northern part of Denmark, there's a dotted line going to Sweden. So from that point and beyond, that's the maritime shipping we've looked at, the various vessel types and their fuel consumption and associated CO2 emissions. And if I want you to remember one of 3 things, it is that for this region, around 5 million tons of fuel is burned annually, and it emits roughly 15 million tons of CO2. So that is the potential we have to decarbonize. Normally in maritime shipping or global shipping, we would look very much at cargo ships, so meaning tankers, bulk carriers, and container ships, which are dominant on global level. But what's really interesting in this region is that the operation of ferries, vehicle carriers, passenger ships actually accounts for 35% of the emissions in the region. This is different than the global shipping, and ferry lines are attractive because their operating pattern is very well determined. They operate in line pattern between 2 ports, and they bunker or they get their fuels at one of these ports typically. So they open an opportunity for a segment that could be easier to decarbonize in this region. Also because the governments around this region are very supportive, and the ferries are in a number of cases essential for the interconnectivity in the region. There's a lot more data on the actual assessment, and the reporting will be released in a couple of weeks' time. So I've just extracted this overview from the project and the actual recommendations, because it becomes clear that national and international or interregional ferries have a large potential in this region to operate on alternative fuels, and all fuels will actually be available in this region, unlike when looking at a global picture. The feeder operation, so the smaller vessels transporting containers, both have an opportunity to decarbonize their operation from the Rotterdam, Hamburg, Bremerhaven, or for the Antwerp, Rotterdam, Amsterdam area into the Baltic Sea, where a significant transport actually goes to Gdynia and to Klaipėda. This makes us talk about hotspots in the region where ports with significant ferry activity and actual significant cargo activity are very good places to start looking for decarbonization or to establish the supply chain. And then working with developing an economic incentive across the value chain to the first movers, so the ports, the ferry lines, the bunkering companies, the cargo owners willing to drive a transition. That's just a little flash of what has been done in this project. The role and possibility of the seaports, well, the role is quite clear. The port needs to be ready for alternative fuels. They need to establish best practice, and the ports as landlords needs to ensure with the local municipality, regulatory authorities, that the ports are ready either to receive a ship just calling the port, a ship leaving service in the port, or a ship that wants to anchor by the port operating on an alternative fuel. If the port also wants to supply fuel for the ship, it also needs to be ready for a ship bunkering these alternative fuels. So it really requires that ports are fuel ready. The 5 ports in the project actually tested a small instrument on how port could assess their readiness level. And again, the port, they needed to assess whether they were ready for bunkering, so for ship fueling in the port, whether they were ready for ships calling the port. So how would they deal with the first ship saying, we would like to call your port with a ship operating on hydrogen or ammonia, can you accept that? Whether they can obtain service in port or anchorage. And then how ready are the port for this? Could they do it as a demonstration? Could they do it at one time? Or is it, could it get to, when would it be at a point where it is business as usual? So the level is ultimately, what is the current state and what is the future state? So this helps the ports to draft up a roadmap when to be ready for different fuels, which is simple, easy to overview, and can be shared with the shipping companies. It can also say something about when ports would like to have different fuels available. That was about the role of the port. If I was to talk about the opportunity or the possibility for the port, now we've taken Gdynia as a proxy port of Gothenburg. It was a an idea that we played with in the project. So it's this is not a firm or confirmed project in any way. It is an opportunity. And it was whether a methanol supply chain and the required infrastructure for ferries and subsequently container feeders could be built around Port of Gdynia. Again, addressing the entire value chain. Well, you look, we have the port there. Then if we look at the ferry operators, well, we have Gdynia Karlskrona, operated by Stena, which is one of the most active voyages in and out of Gdynia. But we also have Gdynia to Hanko, operated by Finnlines. The stakeholders that are interesting here is, of course, the port itself that can drive and facilitate interaction between relevant stakeholders. Off-takers, the shipping companies, could be mentioned, Stena Finnlines. A supplier in the region could be Liquid Wind, developing methanol production in the region, but at least 10 or 12 more companies are developing projects for supply of methanol. And then I mentioned the cargo owners are critical to engage. Looking at Gdynia Karlskrona, it is used by Volvo to transport new cars into Eastern Europe, whereas Hanko Gdynia is used by Stora Enso to transport pulp and paper into also to Poland and countries south of Poland. Both of these companies are interesting because they also have a pledge to decarbonize. So slowly we can start mapping stakeholders across the value chain that have a willingness to be first movers and actually discuss the opportunity of building a supply chain for an alternative fuels. It's important to set ambitious targets between these stakeholders to ensure long-term thinking. To establish an alliance, really. It's about getting the right stakeholders around the table and discuss the barriers they see, as Beata did previously for Port of Gdynia. It's better to get started, the sooner the better, because it takes time to develop something like this. And I'll say my final remark for these green corridors is really to gather the relevant stakeholders across the value chain to get started. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to ask you a direct question, and please maybe repeat it very strictly. Who should be the driver? Who should be the organizer of this whole value chain? It could be port authorities, or we have to ask and wait for the decision of local authorities, or maybe first we have to wait for any regulation and directive coming from Europe. Who you think should be the driver?
I think when we are talking first movers, these are movers that proceed without regulation being in place. It is companies that wants to get early learnings for once the scaling happens. And that is why we see both ports, shipping companies, suppliers already embarking into investing in this transition. Who should be the facilitator, or who should drive it? I think the ports actually play a very central role in this transition. It's not because the ports have the largest investment or has they have to take the highest risk here, but ports are just a very, very central point of that in the value chain, and that can also act as a relatively neutral facilitator. So the port authorities that have the ambition grow their ports and to be first to provide these and build a future business of supplying the fuels and attracting operators, shipping operators, with vessels operating on alternative fuel to the port, then they would be in the forefront of the transition.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And it is very good introduction to our next speaker, Josep Argent from Port of Valencia, who really was a facilitator and beginner of introduce H2 to port facilities. Joseph, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you for the introduction and thank you for inviting me to participate in this interesting conference. So I'm gonna talk about H2 ports. Let me share my screen. I hope you can see it. So, and first, please allow me. Okay, allow me just 1 minute to speak and explain briefly about a few words about my company and about the port itself. My name is Josep Sanz, and I work in a company called Fundación Valenciaport, which is not exactly the port. We are different entities. The port name is Port Authority of Valencia, and we are a private company very aligned with the Port Authority. We are an initiative of the Port Authority, but we focus on innovation in several areas, and specifically we are quite active lately in innovation in transition energy, because transition energy will require a lot of innovation and new concepts to be developed. This is a general idea of the areas in which work. I personally work in sustainability and energy transition, in which the project H2 Port is part of. And then allow me to present the port itself. This is the Port of Valencia, and our main business is related to container traffic. We are the busiest European port at the Mediterranean, with 3 container terminals. Here you have CSP terminal, here you have MSCTB terminal, and APMT terminal. Also an important ro-ro traffic, and we also have some liquid bulk here, some solid bulk here, and passengers here, and cruises are now coming here. And now the port is living a transformation into the future Port of Valencia, which has the strategic goal of being net zero emission at 2030. So a lot of things will change in the port. New fuels will come and new infrastructure will be required, and a lot of innovation projects will be required to test the different technological options. And hydrogen is seen that will be present in the future of the ports in several ways. But after an initial analysis, the conclusion was that the closest to readiness of the use of hydrogen at the port was in the terminal operations, in the use of hydrogen as a fuel for terminal machinery, in which hydrogen as a zero emission options offers some advantages compared to other alternatives such as a pure electric. So that's the motivation for start working on this project. And we asked for funds, and we detect the opportunity in 2018 on a call for proposals by, now it's called Clean Hydrogen Partnership, but it used to be Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. And we applied for funds, and we were selected. And our proposal was to test for 2 years to equipment running on hydrogen and fuel cell. And the final goal of the projects is to make it available for future users to have in the portfolio of original engine manufacturers, original equipment manufacturers, hydrogen versions. So the idea is to develop and test it in real conditions, and in the end, we expect it to have a new alternative for future users. So specifically during the project, we will test two equipment. Reach stacker in MSC terminal here, and a yard tractor, a terminal tractor for ro-ro operation. So it has to be a 4x4 terminal tractor that will operate in Valencia Terminal Europa, property of the Grimaldi Group. They will operate in real conditions, so it will be incorporated as one more of the fleet, and they will be selected, but port workers for doing the regular job. And since this machinery cannot exit terminals, and also for other reasons, because the flexibility of having a mobile hydrogen refueling station is especially interesting in the initial stages of the hydrogen development. The hydrogen refueling concept includes a fixed part and a mobile part. So a trailer will visit this terminal and this terminal once per day in order to do the refueling. I'm gonna share some more details about the specifics of each of the pilots. So very important for the success of an initiative like this one, which has a lot of risk from the practical point of view. We have the funding, but a lot of issues appeared during the deployment of this project. So you need a strong consortium, and we think we have, with the presence of the public authority itself. Also outstanding research institutions, which are key. This is an innovation project. Also the industry to take part of a project like this. We have Carburos Metálicos as hydrogen provider and manager of the hydrogen refueling station. Hyster-Yale as an original engine manufacturer, and Ballard fuel cell provider, also the expertise from Enagas. And key factor end users to have terminal operators who are committed and believe in the potential of these technologies. It's a fundamental part as well, and we have that from MEC Terminal Valencia and the Grimaldi Group. Finally, we are the coordinators, and we have a lot of experience in coordinating experiences like this one. I'm gonna go through this one quite fast. This is the structure of the project. So 3 pilots and 3 work packages assisting the pilots. So I think this is more interesting, is to share some more details about the specifics of the solutions. First, the hydrogen refueling. As said, it is going to be mobile. Mobile means that there is with this unit that will deliver with a panel dispenser. With the dispenser will deliver the fuel and visit daily the 2 terminals. And a fixed part in which the hydrogen will be received, because there will be no hydrogen production in H2 ports. It will come from outside, and it will be stored in this tank. This tank. This is a picture of the real future hydrogen refueling station. It's not finished yet, but we are on the way. Here you can see the tank, and in which store the hydrogen maximum 40 bar, and it is compressed. Here you can see inside, you would see the compressor if we open the door. That raises the pressure from the pressure in the tank, in the buffer tank, to the pressure stored in the mobile unit. 2 levels of pressure, 300 bar and 450, and that's for saving reasons. So you start the refueling in these vessels. You do not need to compress all the hydrogen at the same level, and just to finish the refueling with the 450. So this equipment and the design is led by Hydrogen Centro Nacional del Hidrógeno, the National Hydrogen Center in Spain. Also with in the design and construction, in the installation also participate Carburos Metálicos, and all partners are involved in this work package. Some figures, interesting figures. The maximum amount of hydrogen expected to be delivered daily, maximum capacity are about 60 kilograms. That's yet to be confirmed, but it will be at minimum 60 kilograms, which will be enough, more than enough for the pilot proposed. And also with a hydrogen flow rate up to 3.6 kilograms per minute. That means that the refueling will take, we expect, surrounding 10 minutes. And that's the huge advantage of the hydrogen versions compared to a pure electric. You can refuel your device, the reach stacker of the tractor, in just some minutes. So it does not have a huge impact on productivity. Then reach stacker, it is being designed and constructed by an original engine manufacturer, High-Style Yale. This is going to be a new building. Actually, it's almost done. Here you have the 3Ds and real images of the fuel cell. Fuel cell will be 2 Nuvera fuel cell, 45 Nuvera fuel cell, but it's almost constructed. And you can see some details that distinguish hydrogen versions here, in which you can see the hydrogen tanks. It is designed for having about 32 kilograms of hydrogen, which will be enough for 2 shifts. In the case of the Port of Valencia, 12 hours of operation. Also very important for the success of a project like this is the acceptance by port workers to the use of the units like this, and for that it is very important to start talking about this from the beginning, and the dialogue between the manufacturer and the terminal to define which characteristics has an equipment like this have for being well accepted by port workers.
Joseph, sorry, I would like to conclude.
Okay, just 2 minutes. In the case of the terminal tractor, it is gonna be a retrofit led by Athena with Ballard fuel cell. It's gonna be, the Ballard also had required adaptation to fit into the spaces. And in this case, retrofit is really challenging because there are a lot of things that are already determined, so there are a lot of things to do. But in the end, the collaboration between all partners have led to this successful. We already had the truck with the first move, still not in full operations, but it is still beginning to shape as it will look like. Then there is a cross-cutting work package to talk about like cross-cutting issues like logistics, regulatory, and market uptake. Regarding the planning to end, we are about to have the hydrogen refueling station finished during this month, and we expect to have the equipment here either at the end of November or the beginning of December, in which there will be some work to preparation, and we'll start the piloting period as soon as possible. So we expect to have the end of the test at the end of 2024. So it has been just a quick introduction. If you want more information, you can check our webpage and also LinkedIn. And we try to be very active in LinkedIn and Twitter. So we will be pleased. And you can also contact me if you have any doubt that you can want to comment anything. So that was it. I'm at your disposal for contacting either in this event or you can contact me later.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank you all our speakers. Beata, dziękuję również i dziękuję również Państwu za ten panel. Niestety czas nam się już skończył.
I think the speakers say thank you. Unfortunately, the time is up.
Jesteśmy największą metropolią w Polsce Północnej. Jesteśmy otwarci na to, co nowe. Jesteśmy świetnym miejscem do życia. Jesteśmy Trójmiastem i dlatego zawsze będziemy dbać bardziej.
Korki na wszystkich drogach dojazdowych do Trójmiasta już dawno przekroczyły akceptowalny poziom. Dlatego samorząd województwa pomorskiego uruchomił nową linię kolejową łączącą metropolię trójmiejską z Kaszubami. Dzięki podróży pociągiem tysiące osób może szybciej i wygodniej dojechać do pracy, szkoły lub na zakupy, a potem wrócić do domu. Nie trać czasu i pieniędzy w korkach. Podróżuj szybko i wygodnie koleją. do pracy, do szkoły, na zakupy.